However, Rashee Rice is the walking easy button that Patrick Mahomes didn't have through the first 6 weeks and didn't really have through so much of last season. Can you take the burden off of Mahomes' shoulders? I think this is something that Josh Allen probably understands quite well.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel. We are happy you are with us. As always, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel. We are here in the Connors and Ferris podcast studio, and you know what we're doing. Leading up to every game the Bills play, we talk to a reporter, someone who covers the team in the city that the Bills are going to be competing against. And this week, it is, yes, as you all know, the Kansas City Chiefs. So we want to welcome in Joshua Brisco. He is the pre- and post-game Chiefs radio network. He's on that network. He does the Everything Else and the Only Weird Games podcast on the Chiefs on the KC Sports Network. Joshua, welcome to Buffalo Plus.
Thank you for having me. This is, as always, I think, the most exciting week on the schedule from our side. I assume that's true for you as well. And if you want to go ahead and schedule us to do this again in January, you let me know and I'll clear out some space, because it seems like that's how it goes.
It is. Isn't it funny? It does feel like they're in the division together.
Yes.
You just assume 2 games every year. Now, you know, and we know the way these games go, right? The Bills pretty good in the regular season. And then there's that whole issue with the playoffs. So let's start with this part. When the Bills play against the Chiefs, for the Bills, there's a sense, I believe, of you got to win the game. It impacts you in so many ways, but they know what everybody's going to say. You still got to do it in the playoffs.
Right.
How did the Chiefs, from your side and your opinion of somebody who's around this team all the time, how do you think they look at the Bills, especially in the regular season?
I think the answer for this season may be slightly different than in years past, but I think what you may be kind of getting at is what I would offer, to say that it's impossible for either of these teams to truly prove what they want to prove in September, October, November, December. And again, the Bills have had enough success, obviously, to also be in that headspace. Everything we want to prove, we got to prove it in January and then hopefully February. So I do think there's probably a little bit of a different tint. And obviously, when Buffalo is coming into these regular season games off of postseason losses, there's a little bit of a feeling of like, let's get some revenge here and then build on it in January. And for the Chiefs, it's often, hey, we handled these guys on the bigger stage in a win or go home scenario. And so I don't think there's quite as much of the, I don't want to say even vitriol, because I don't even think that's the right term, but there's not quite as much intensity in terms of like, we're going to get one over on these guys, because the Chiefs have the record books in their favor in terms of all those postseason wins. I do think this is a game to circle as soon as the schedule drops, and I do think, and the Chiefs are obviously on a little bit of a short week here, I think the intensity in the facilities this week is going to be super, super high. This is a very important game for 2 teams who are not leading their respective divisions right now. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Both, with rivals now, you'd say, that have younger quarterbacks. I mean, obviously May's a little younger, that are both playing really well, and at least as the competition there. So it is funny because, as the Chiefs have shown and the Bills have shown, I mean, that path of winning the division, getting there, pushing for home field advantage is nice. They're both, it looks like they're going to have competition during the year. Now, from the outside, looking at the Chiefs, if I'm not mistaken, you guys were finished and buried early in the year, right? Wasn't that where you were?
Yeah, 0-2, and the season was over, yeah.
Season was over. And then you got a couple big wins, and then you lost to Jacksonville. Season wasn't over, but that wasn't good. And now they've bounced back a little bit. Where are they now? They're coming off that win against the Commanders, kind of the way you want to win a game like that, the way I would say. A little bit of a push, and then they took care of them. Where do you think the Chiefs are heading into this game with the Bills?
I think the word that I would use now for the first time, honestly, in about a year and a half, I think the Chiefs are in a stable place. That was obviously not the case the first 6 weeks of the season when they don't have Rashee Rice, and ultimately they end up losing Xavier Worthy, I think 3 snaps into the year, and then he's sidelined for a little bit as they tried to get their receivers back up to speed that way. So you have Rice come back after 6 games, and before he even returned, you had the Lions win that was so huge, especially with what you mentioned there with the Jags. That Jags game was just a misery on several levels. A game that you feel like you just can't give one of those up, or else you got to claw out of that hole. Well, they go on and they beat the Lions the next week. They blow out the Raiders 2 weeks ago, and like you said, that Commanders win, even that game was the first half of Chiefs Commanders felt a little bit like Chiefs Jags, and why I was really impressed with the Commanders win is that in the second half it felt closer to Chiefs Raiders, of being able to put your foot on a team that everybody's close in the modern NFL, but a lesser team with a backup quarterback there in Washington. So all that to say, I think what we've seen now, the running game is the best it's looked this season. It's not a great unit by any means, but I think they can do the job when you're running the offense through a lot of these quick hitters to Rashee Rice. And then you're off of Rice, you're playing to Worthy, to Travis Kelce, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Hollywood Brown, some of the guys who are now in slightly smaller roles and do a lot of the dirty work. It is a really well-rounded offense. A couple questions on the O-line right now, just from like an availability standpoint, I suppose. But overall, I would say the Chiefs are in a stable point right now, and the offense is starting to look a lot more familiar as opposed to last year when everybody was hurt and they were running the ball for 3.5 yards a carry and just keeping their head above water.
Yeah, Rashee Rice, what's he do for this offense?
Everything. It is such a water raiser to have Rashee Rice back. I love talking about like the gravitational pull of offensive players because it helps me visualize, how important it is to find green grass anywhere on the field and how important it is defensively to close that space. Well, even with this older and really solid version of Travis Kelce. He's having a better start to this year than he had last season, but it's an older version of Travis Kelce still demanding a ton of attention, and then you want to make the deep shot stuff work too in Xavier Worthy or even Tyquan Thornton. Now I've mentioned, I think, 6 receivers and the tight end. When you are able to have Rashee Rice either demand attention and open somebody else up somewhere else, that's a huge win, or Rashee Rice is the walking easy button that Patrick Mahomes didn't have through the first 6 weeks and didn't really have through so much of last season. Can you take the burden off of Mahomes' shoulders? I think this is something that Josh Allen probably understands quite well. Can you get your quarterback to a place where you say, hey, we don't need you to make 30 superhero plays or do all of the processing pre-snap and post-snap to just make magic. Now Rashee Rice is back. Those quick screens, those quick slants, so many things that Rice can do with the ball in his hand becomes a bit of an extension of the run game, takes a little bit of that burden off of Mahomes, and it makes everybody around him look better because everybody else moves down a peg in terms of what priority they are.
Yeah, this is very depressing for Bills fans to hear because the way it is for Josh Allen. Like he's got a superior weapon, I think, in James Cook, who's playing as well as any back in the league.
Absolutely.
He's just not getting it out of the pass game. And it's funny that you say about, I don't know where Rashee Rice would be listed amongst the great receivers in the NFL, right? I mean, there's guys like Jefferson, Chase, and all those players. But you do talk about making everybody better because of the gravity where you got to be concerned about that player all the time on the field. And it sort of rises all boats, right? When you have players like that. There's a lot of focus on Xavier Worthy from Buffalo. Bills made that trade. Mm-hmm. Andy Reid got a speed guy, and he's filled the roster with more speed guys. Numbers are kind of pedestrian for him this year. I know he missed some time. Where's Worthy in this offense?
Can I take a quick diversion back to draft day really quick?
Sure.
This is a take of mine that people here did not like. I think the Bills did the objectively correct thing by trading with the Chiefs on draft night and letting the Chiefs go get Xavier Worthy. Because if the Bills wanted Xavier Worthy, then you stay there, you pick him, and you go make your offensive plan around him. But if the Bills were looking around going, well, we know what they're moving up for, and we like this guy over this guy, or here's where our draft board is all together, I don't think teams ought to be afraid to trade with rivals when you're swapping draft picks. Like, I know the Joe Flacco thing's kind of weird with the Browns and the Bengals, but if you're just moving picks around, do what you think is best for your team. Now, obviously, the Chiefs are the team in this decade that can make you look bad for dealing with them at all, like the Patriots did for so many years. I actually thought the Bills deserved credit for that. All that to say, it is a huge bummer that Worthy started this season with his entire shoulder shakeup with that collision with Travis Kelce that knocked him out for a little bit. Then he's had this nagging ankle since then this year. I think Xavier Worthy's role on this team, being the number 2 wide receiver to Rashee Rice, is how this was always supposed to fit together. What Worthy did as a rookie in the second half of the year was very impressive to me, because it's very hard to be a rookie wide receiver in the NFL. It's even harder to do that in Andy Reid's offense. And much like Rice did in his rookie year, it was down the stretch that Worthy really came into his own and started being a real part of the offense, but a version of the offense that had a struggling version of Travis Kelce by his standards and no Rashee Rice. So all that to say, long road to the short thought is that I think Xavier Worthy has been very good for the Chiefs. I don't think they would take that draft pick back or go make any changes to how their recent past went. I think they're happy with Worthy. I think they should be, and I think the best version of this Chiefs offense, if everybody's healthy, fingers crossed, knock on wood and all that stuff, if everybody's healthy, I think we're still going to see Xavier Worthy's best games sometime in the relatively near future.
I will say, I'll push back on the one thing. If I'm Brandon Beane and I see my phone and it says Brett Veach, I'm not answering.
I get it.
Because here's the reason why. If Andy wants him, I don't want Andy to have him. That's the way I look at it. It's a speed guy. They want speed. Now, the Bills made that move. Unfortunately for them, the 3rd round pick, Dwayne Carter, got hurt, hasn't really done anything, and they end up trading back a couple of times. And they have Keon Coleman, who is, let's just be safe and say, a work in progress for them. And they're still looking for speed. Maybe not to take Worthy, but I think I would have had him wait it out, make him sweat before I do it to get the 3rd round pick. That being said, that's who they have. They have Rice. They have Hollywood Brown. Tyquan Thornton, if you talk about boom or bust, but I'm looking 22 yards a catch. It's about 50% catch rate. How often are they going deep to him?
He barely played against Washington. I had the snap counts out earlier. It was 4 or 5 snaps, and it kind of made me sad. And then I looked at the rest of the offensive snap count and went, oh, it's because Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy are playing together now. So Thornton's best stuff was early on in Worthy's absence because they needed some speed on the outside. I do not think his story is done, though. I do think he's a name for Bills fans to keep in mind, because if you do see him on the field, you have to respect, and this is kind of what I keep hoping to see more of from this offense. Again, they've had 2 games with Rice back against 2 teams they were supposed to beat, so I think this Bills game is going to be such an interesting test. Maybe the Chiefs show some more things, maybe they save it till January, but when you have Worthy and Thornton on the field together, potentially Worthy and Hollywood and Thornton all out there together, there's so much speed to account for, where whatever you're asking your safeties to do, their job is nearly impossible. And if you're going to devote safety help to deep speed, well, then Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce are there to make you regret that decision. So I'm actually like a pretty big Tyquan Thornton guy. I'd like to see him keep getting more work. I hope he does as they kind of figure out this offense. The Chiefs went pretty heavy against Washington as well. A lot of Noah Gray, their number 2 tight end. So I do hope we see some Thornton shots, because he's also been very good at tracking the deep ball and hauling those in, which is an underrated part of actually just being fast and getting open. You've got to receive still too, and he did a really nice job of that in Worthy's absence.
So where's Mahomes in all this? Because as great as he's been, obviously he's got the resume behind Brady, right? That's the 2 guys, if you look at it that way. But in terms of numbers and the way he's played, it's been down a little bit over the past couple of years, right? Where he just blew everybody up, and then it's been different. When I watch him now, I see a guy who is seeing the field really well. I mean, I know he had 2 picks last night, and that happens, but I see the field. I see him with the weapons, guys on the move constantly is what it looks like to me, that he's in a pretty good rhythm and he's taking advantage of all these different weapons that he has. Where do you see him now? Where do you see this going for him?
It really does feel like he's seeing the field well. It seems like he's seeing the Matrix, so to speak. Things are moving slower and slower for him as his career goes on, and he is just, honestly, he is so good at every part of quarterbacking. It's amazing. One of my friends and co-hosts on Only Weird Games, his name's Seth Kaiser, and he's written and talked about this a few times over the years, where Seth has said Patrick Mahomes, his greatest power is his ability to shapeshift. And that, I think, is why his numbers have suffered some. And certainly last year, with no Rashee Rice, that version of Travis Kelce, no Isaiah Pacheco, and a struggling running game and all of that, Patrick Mahomes was able to shapeshift into this shorter, smaller game of just keep the chains moving, get to the red zone, score enough points, let the defense do their thing, do it again next drive. That was not fun or explosive. That was a far cry from the Tyreek Hill version of the offense that everybody learned about Patrick Mahomes through. But ultimately, that's the thing to me that sets him apart on such an unbelievable level, is that I have to stop myself because it sounds uncritical. Like, over the years, I have struggled as an analyst to talk about Patrick Mahomes in a way that doesn't seem hyperbolic. But I really do think at this point, whatever version of him he has to be to keep the offense moving is who he's going to be. It's why for so many of those first several weeks, I just had to double check to make sure he wasn't anymore. He was leading the Chiefs in rushing. He's not now. Pacheco's crossed that line. Good for everybody. You don't want him living that way. But he really has an unbelievable, uncanny ability to manage whatever the surroundings are. And I think we're going to get a really fun version of him from here on out, because we got 1 game or 2 games of Rashee Rice so far.
Yeah, you mentioned the run game and him being the leader. I just find his runs to be very impactful.
Yes.
I'm sure you do too, where it's not about, they're not running, just let him just take a handoff or take the ball off from center and run around the end. He's waiting, and then he's ducking out of bounds, and he's doing what he does. But, Pacheco looks 4 yards a carry, pretty good. And then Hunt gets in the end zone. What's the balance between those two in the backfield?
I think it ends up being a 3-man conversation, but those two have certainly led the way. I think Pacheco is going to be the guy you're going to see in your more standard run situations, with a slight edge to Pacheco over Kareem Hunt. Hunt has been really, really good in short yardage situations these last 2 years, and Pacheco's knock on him since his draft profile was that he doesn't have high-end vision as a runner. He's going to hit the hole, he's going to hit it hard, he's going to take some bodies with him and run like he's angry at the turf, but he's not going to do a whole lot of reading, patience, and bouncing and all of that. So Hunt is your guy in the short yardage. Pacheco's much better under center, and so I hope we see more of that. We've seen them increase that percentage a little bit as the season's gone on, more under center runs, even though they're obviously a shotgun team by nature. So I think you'll see the most of Isaiah Pacheco. Kareem Hunt is your short yardage and trusted in the red zone as a pass catcher, as a pass protector. And then Brashard Smith, the rookie, he was a wide receiver in college until his final year, and then he converted to running back, and the Chiefs drafted him late. And he's an interesting guy who I think his best play against Washington's not in the box score, got wiped out by a penalty. But he is a fascinating weapon in the horizontal passing game. When you want to have a counter to not a run counter, but just a counter punch to Rashee Rice in the screen game or whatever else you want to do. Feeding him is interesting because he moves like a jitterbug.
Last thing on the offense is your O-line. You mentioned it. What's going on now? I mean, I know maybe it's still just up in the air, but what's going on between injuries and what's happening with Simmons?
Yeah, so with Josh Simmons, there's still no real official timeline on that. Nate Taylor of ESPN, my other co-host on Only Weird Games, I love plugging the show. He had the report before the Commanders game that it was looking like maybe a few weeks out. They were hoping to have Simmons back. Andy Reid most recently called it a family thing and said that there's been good communication there. It's all been strange, to be honest. I mean, you have this sort of surprise absence the day of the Lions game, and then we haven't seen or heard from him or anything official from him or his agent since. So that has been odd, and I don't know, we can split hairs on this, but I've kind of gotten to a point where I'm at least accepting of, hey, you know what, if for whatever reason, if it has this sort of veil of privacy around it, I have no choice but to nod and respect that and hope that we do see him again. And again, it sounds like they're planning on having him back this year, but that's all unofficial. And then Trey Smith, the right guard, he had his back lock up on him a little bit before halftime against the Raiders. Mike Caliendo is a capable backup. He played guard throughout the playoffs last year when Joe Thuney moved out to tackle. So he has real experience. He was okay against Washington. And then Jalen Moore, the former 49ers tackle, got some run last year backing up Trent Williams. He's really held his own at left tackle, but with 2 starts under his belt, his worst game and his worst half was the first half against the Commanders. So interesting to see like what Buffalo will do this week. I assume it will be Jalen Moore. I don't know. It could be Trey Smith, just backs. Who knows how that's going to feel after another week of rest. But if it is Jalen Moore, I'll be very curious to see how the Bills try to attack him. They have more film of him now in this offense. The Lions barely knew he was going to play. And then by the Raiders game, that the Raiders could have known the Chiefs' plays, and I don't think it would have mattered. So much less their lineup.
It's different for the Bills. I mean, this past week, they got Hoyt and Ogunjobi back. They were both suspended for 6 games, so they got a lot of snaps. First tape they've put on the field. They've lost Ed Oliver maybe for the rest of the season, which is a big loss for them. And they started rotating the rookie corner and rookie safety. So they put a lot out there that the Chiefs have now seen, which, I do think sometimes while the players have less experience, there is a little benefit of the other team not really knowing how they're going to be used. So that's kind of fascinating, but it also plays into what we talk about, where it may look one way on Sunday, and then you go forward 2 months later and the teams know each other better. They've seen all this. So we'll see how it plays out. On the Chiefs side of defense, it always seems to start with Chris Jones. He's playing, seems like a lot of snaps. If I looked at it correctly, played most of them last night. Where's Chris Jones right now?
On the field. You just assume that he is on the field. You're 100% right. He is playing a ton. And unfortunately, the defensive tackle room, it started the year thin and it's gotten thinner. Omar Norman-Lott, the rookie second-round pick, just went to IR. His season's over, and he was having trouble staying healthy, going back to training camp. And so it is a very, very thin group. The Chiefs traded for Derek Nottie, who Bills fans will probably remember as being a part of this Chiefs defensive line for many years. They let him walk. The Jets were probably going to cut him. The Chiefs went in for a little pick swap and said, we want to make sure we get him back. Mike Pennell, they let go, and he's in Cincinnati, and that was bizarre from the moment they released him. Jerry Tillery, best known with his time with the Chargers, I suppose. He's in the mix, but that's it. Like there are 3 healthy defensive tackles on the active roster right now. They have 3 on the practice squad as well. They clearly don't love any of them. So, I mean, it starts with Chris Jones in a huge, huge way. And the 4-man pass rush to me right now is my number 1 outstanding issue with this team. I really like George Karlaftis. He doesn't win fast most of the time. He wins over the course of time. He's relentless that way. He's a very good player, but he's not a quick winner off the edge. There's just not more help for Chris Jones in terms of pass rushing from the defensive tackle position. Tillery hasn't shown that. That's not who Nottie is. And I really like Charles Omenihu, and Mike Dana is a nice player, but the 4-man pass rush is not enough to consistently bother opposing quarterbacks. So you get Spags dialing up his exotic blitzes, and I'm sure that showdown on Sunday is going to be a fascinating one between Spags and Josh Allen and the Bills offense altogether. But it is a Chris Jones defense. They've been pretty good against number 1 running. They've been very good against teams' number 1 running backs, and they've been pretty good against the pass. Quarterback scrambling have killed them, and Jones has been on the field for those as well, for 2 big ones that ended up costing them. But it is not even close at this point to where the hierarchy is. Chris Jones is the front 4, and I love Trent McDuffie, another blue chip player in the secondary. He's a big deal. There's a lot of important players. The defensive line just belongs to Chris Jones.
Yeah, it'll be interesting with the Bills because they have struggled against the blitz, and it really, what the Chiefs did in the playoffs, when they came with the late blitz and got to Josh and messed up the last shot they had in that game, and Atlanta really came after them, and the Bills have struggled with that. Carolina wasn't as much of a blitz, but the Bills got a big lead on them and ran it. The Bills have run the ball well, and James Cook was fantastic last week. It's that may be a test of wills there a little bit, because I think the Bills are going to want to try to run it. When I look at the rest of the defense, it's all the names that we just know in Bolton, Nall, McDuffie, Tranquil. Like they've been pretty healthy, right? Outside of what you talked about on the D line, but most of those guys have played the whole year.
Yeah, they've been pretty healthy, and like you said, it's a lot of familiar faces. Yeah, Norman Law, and then also Ashton Gelati, I could have mentioned as a defensive end, a rookie third rounder, getting some more run that way. But not only is it guys that have been healthy, it's guys that you've seen and heard from. Justin Reed was a big departure in free agency, but the Chiefs have leaned even more on Shamari Connor and Brian Cook and Jaden Hicks. He was rookie last year, getting more run now. Tershawn Wharton, wit to the Carolina Panthers, got a ton of money in free agency, and that's led to the defensive tackle thing there. But Wharton and Reed are the guys you're talking about in terms of like actual departures. And yeah, other than the defensive tackle issues, I'm making sure I'm not missing. I don't. There are a couple little like blips on the injury report here and everything, but all of those main guys have been on the field pretty consistently.
Yeah, that's why I find this game to be interesting because, especially on the Bills side, there's because of injuries and because of the suspensions and the youth of some of the players, they've gotten. I mean, our old friend Jordan Poyer is out there, at least on the early downs. Now it's safety with some injuries, and but they've gotten Jordan Hancock, the rookie out of Ohio State, 6th-round pick. They've gotten him on the field. So this is what I think they're mixing in. It's given a little juice to this defense that needed it. So it'll be fascinating. They jump from Andy Dalton to Patrick Mahomes, which is a pretty big jump for this week to see how they end up doing. 3 straight years in the Super Bowl. Obviously, the Super Bowl did not go the way Chiefs fans or Chiefs players would have wanted, but the chance to make it 4 in a row, that's for the lack of overall total final success they've had in Buffalo. It is the one thing people hold their, hand over their heart that this franchise made it 4 years in a row. Is it talked about in Kansas City, or is it just sort of there because they've been to a lot of Super Bowls and now have a chance to get to 4 in a row?
Yeah, so last year we talked about the three-peat all the time. I mean, that was very much ignoring that would have been foolish, right? Because everyone was thinking about it, and I don't know how much the team talked about it, but in the media, we were talking about the three-peat all year long. I have heard like not a peep about the going back for the 4th year. And I think it makes sense. Like when you go to the Super Bowl and have the result that you had last year, being there wasn't the accomplishment. Getting there for the 3rd time, it's an incredible accomplishment. Like you would know, getting there 4 times is an unbelievable accomplishment. But this team has tasted the absolute best of the best. They've gotten to that mountaintop. They wanted history in the three-peat, and so now I think the sort of quieter big picture storyline this year, one step above going to the 4th in a row, I think is most likely the last year with Travis Kelce and not wanting to go out the way that he would have gone out last year if he would have retired this offseason. So no, they're really, I'm incredibly spoiled to confirm this, but there's been very, very little talk about going to 4 in a row. And it really is. And maybe the 0-2 start helps this way. It really is about like handling business now and making sure there's not a huge hangover. And really the first truly disappointing season that Patrick Mahomes has had, that was on the table 2 weeks into the year. I wasn't eating it, but it was on the table in front of us. Now here we are talking about another Chiefs-Bills showdown and the big picture and the zoomed in up close. I think this team's very focused on the week-to-week. Maybe once it gets a little colder down here, we'll start thinking about that 4 in a row.
Yeah, and to see where everybody is at that time. I always ask this, and we've seen these teams play so much. I think I know, but it's a little different type of a team. What's the game plan? What would the Chiefs say if we do this, we'll have success, especially offensively against this Bills team? How much, it's funny because the Bills' weakness has been stopping the run. Mm-hmm. I certainly don't think of the Chiefs as a run-first team. So they match up somewhat well against them, but Mahomes has always found a way to move the football and make plays. What's the game plan, especially from Andy Reid, coming into this game? They say that would lead to the most success for the Chiefs.
On the offensive side, this is like, again, pretty cliche, I guess. I know it's not very creative, but I think if you have the ability to just look to the matchup that you prefer while Buffalo is figuring out what that secondary looks like in a best case scenario, the Chiefs have played a lot of banged up defenses in this stretch, which you could use as an argument to like, hey, let's see it against better units. They've done it as an underdog, they've done it as favorites, and so I think that questioning that overall would be foolish. But if you want to say, hey, like, let's see them piece it together another time and just prove it over and over and over again, I would understand that. I don't really care if it's Rashee Rice with 12 receptions for 130 yards, or if it's Xavier Worthy with 6 for 120. I don't really care how they build the plane offensively. I do think it's going to end up being another one of those moments where you know how malleable Patrick Mahomes can be. And this is the first, I think, like full speed test with all of those weapons. That would be the thing I would be like just punching air about if I was in Buffalo, going, man, like I know we saw Rashee Rice come back against the Raiders, and we saw them with another week against Washington, but those games were not Andy Reid's most creative play calling days. Those games were not really in question, at least in the fourth quarter against Washington. So I think the scary thing is that the Chiefs have a little bit of mystery in terms of how they want to dole this out. But I think ultimately you're going to put the ball in Patrick Mahomes' hands, and you're going to let him create whoever he finds to do that. The Kareem Hunt receiving touchdown against Washington goes back to that Mahomes' legs and the gravity of it all. He just buys time forever and then rolls and starts to approach the line of scrimmage, and he's looking at the pylon, and that Commanders defender, God bless him, I think you got to do this. That Commanders defender starts closing down on Mahomes, and he just pops it over his head, and Kareem Hunt's there wide open. It's that kind of thing, the play extending, the creation, and then just knowing where all those moving parts are, that I think you've got to make Buffalo prove that they are so disciplined that they're not going to fall for any of those things that Mahomes does. And I don't think any defense in the world is good enough to keep Mahomes from doing that a couple times a game.
Yeah, he's certainly had a lot of success, and it's a fascinating matchup with he and Josh Allen. The Bills trying to get their passing game going, but relying a lot on a running back who can control the game. So we'll see what ends up happening. Hey, Joshua, let everybody know where they can find you and get more information as we lead up to and even post game on Chiefs and Bills.
You can follow me on, I think, pretty much all of the social platforms currently functioning. Functioning is a strong word. At JB Brisco. There's no E on Brisco, just Brisco. So Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads. I try to give a little attention to all of them because I know people are in different places. And then the shows are Only Weird Games and Everything Else on KC Sports Network. You can find Everything Else, which is my show about the Kansas City Chiefs, and everything else I have found interesting in the days before the show. You can search for that wherever you get your podcasts, and the Chiefs Radio Network, pregame and postgame on all of our affiliates across the country. You can also listen online if you'd like. I understand talking to the Buffalo audience here. If you want to listen to your own home team coverage there, I understand. We also do podcasting for the postgame show. So if you search for the Chiefs Radio Network postgame show, you want to hear what we were talking about after Chiefs Raiders or Chiefs Commanders, come on by, do a little bit of research, and I am Kansas City's, I hope, foremost Josh Allen lover. So you're going to find a friend in me every week, but one or two times this season.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that about the way he's perceived. Obviously, he's had a lot of success, and he won the game with that run last year against the Chiefs. I would assume, as much as it's a battle, and it's hard for Bills fans, even though I know they respect how good Mahomes is, the thought coming back the other way of how good Josh Allen has been, and that it's the team you cover that has held him back from the ultimate thing that he wants.
Yeah, I think it's probably easier for the love to flow from Kansas City to Buffalo than vice versa. Like I have no shame in saying I've thought like, well, if the Chiefs aren't going to be in it, what a story for Buffalo and for Josh Allen to finally get that monkey off their back and finally raise that trophy. I also, man, I just love how Josh Allen plays, and I love how Patrick Mahomes plays. They're my two favorite quarterbacks in football. And I think I grew up playing NFL Street 2. It's my favorite video game of all time. And in their own right, Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, and throw in Lamar Jackson, who's also incredible, but those guys were like built. They jumped out of the video game and then went into the NFL in time for us to watch them with our own eyes. So I truly feel incredibly lucky to cover Patrick Mahomes at a time when Josh Allen is sharing the stage. I find him just absolutely delightful watch. Sometimes, especially early on, it was good that I wasn't rooting for him with the rooting interest that you guys did. Some of those turnovers back in the day must have been stressful, but for me, he is an absolute circus, and I mean that in the nicest of ways.
Yeah. And the one thing with these two playing is you'll see them on the field, and then as soon as they go to commercial, one or the other is going to be in every commercial. These guys are all over the place.
That's
true. They both get a lot. All right. Hey, Joshua Brisco, thanks so much for being with us. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to the game, and we'll see how it plays out. And then maybe look forward to talking later in the year when they meet in the playoffs.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to go ahead and block out some calendar space. We'll deal with the details later.
All right. Sounds good. All right. That's going to do it for us. Thank all of you for being with us. As you know, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We will be live at the distillery Thursday night at from 5 till 8 o'clock doing the podcast live. So Jenna, Dan, and myself will all be out there. Make sure you stop out and say hello. That's going to do it for us from the Connors and Ferris podcast studio. And we'll see you next time on Buffalo Plus.